All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Terry White, Worldwide Photography Evangelist here at Adobe. It's my pleasure once again to be streaming live for everyone here and everyone that's going to watch this in the replay. Just let me get a couple things going here, just really quick. Just click a couple buttons to make sure we're live everywhere. And it looks like we are. Hey, Sam Peterson. So I see Jordan Lewis, I see Gareth Williams, I see Michael Dawson. Welcome everyone that's coming in right now, and glad that you can join me here for my masterclass. So for those of you who are new, this is maybe your first time you're ever watching on Adobe Live or watching on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. Friday is Adobe's Masterclass Day. So that means the Adobe Evangelists, myself included, do master classes all day. So Paul Tranny just finished up a design class. You can always go back and watch these replays, by the way. We're also kicking off a brand new Adobe Live YouTube channel. So we were using the Creative Cloud YouTube channel, and now it's on the Adobe Live YouTube channel. So you should probably go ahead and subscribe to that too while you're at it. And with that said, well, today is about photography for me, always. But so the master classes kind of go in order of design, photography with myself. Then we take a break and do a Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. And then I believe the next person up again is Paul Tranny doing Photoshop. Then after that, I believe is the Illustrator Creative Challenge. And then Jason Levine is back from sabbatical, so he'll be doing audio and video. Howard Pinsky does UX UI design with Adobe XD. And then we wrap up the day with Kyle Webster doing drawing and digital painting with Photoshop and Fresco and apps of that nature. So it's kind of a full day to learn. And of course, you can always come back and watch these after if you don't have time to watch all day long. But we're happy that you're here, and I'm happy that you're here watching mine. So what's today's topic? And I was very specific to say, how to get started with Lightroom. And I just want to make sure that we all understand which Lightroom I'm referring to. I've done several classes and several master classes where the focus was Lightroom Classic. So that's the version we've had for over 15 years. That's the version that you manage your images and you store your images and you back up your images on your own hard drives. And that application is the one that I use mostly, and that's the one that a lot of the focus is on for the masterclass because that's the one a lot of people use. But one of my colleagues asked me the other day, hey, is there a good tutorial for how to get started in Lightroom? And then I thought about it. I was like, I got plenty on Classic, but I'd never actually done one on just Lightroom, the cloud-based version. And I said, oh, well, there's my masterclass topic for the next, the coming Friday. So here we are. So what this will be is it'll be targeted 100% at Lightroom, not Classic. It'll also involve mobile because Lightroom is an ecosystem. And I'm going to walk you through the entire process, at least to kind of get that under our belts once. And then we can dive a little deeper into some of the areas. But a lot of times I end up running out of time and I didn't get a chance to show the whole workflow. And then I'm like, oh no, I'm rushing at the very end. And I only have less than an hour. So I want to make sure I get it all done first. Then we can go back, drill into questions, so forth and so on. All right, so with that said, if you are watching somewhere else, I mentioned questions, and you want to ask questions, which that's why this is live, so you can do that in the chat. And so, for example, I see David Archer over on my Facebook page, and David, welcome. But if I won't get a chance to look at all the various chats from all the different places. So if you really want to see this and participate in the chat, head over to b.net/Adobe Live. You can sign in with your free Adobe ID. You can even sign in with your social media account. And then you can participate in that chat, the one I'm going to be looking at, to ask your questions. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to start kind of from scratch, and then we'll go from there. All right, so I'm looking at Lightroom on my desktop right now. Now, keep in mind, I mentioned that we're going to talk about mobile as well. So Lightroom is not just a desktop application. Classic is just a desktop application, but Lightroom itself is also the ecosystem that involves multiple platforms. I was requested to send my Lightroom versus Lightroom Classic stream to Adobe. Okay, cool. Cool, Sean. All right, so I'm on Lightroom on a desktop. But for example, if I were to toggle over to my iPad, we're looking at the exact same set of images, the exact same 54 or 59,000 whatever images on my iPad. And if I had my phone connected, we can look at the same thing on my phone. So Lightroom's available on desktop. It's available on iOS. It's available on Android. And of course, iOS includes iPad OS, which is iPad. And there's one more place that we don't always think of. It's also available on, hang on for a minute, let me get to the right place. Oh, if I hit the right key, that would help. It's also available on the web. So here it is in my web browser. I'm looking at lightroom.adobe.com, signed into the same Adobe ID. I have access to the same images. So I have access to my images everywhere, not just on my desktop, not just on my phone, not just on my iPad. Whatever changes I make, whatever images I import, they will be available in all those places. I don't have to do anything extra. So let's get through that workflow first, and then we can, not Linux, let's get through that workflow first, and then we can continue on, and you're just kidding. I knew you were kidding, that's why I smiled. Let's get through the workflow, and then we'll address any questions, or like I said, I can dive deeper in some of the areas. So first and foremost, if I were doing this in Classic, I would start off with an empty catalog. I would show you from scratch. But there's no such thing as a catalog in Lightroom. You're working with your images, and it's always going to be how many ever images you've imported. So in order for me to start from scratch, I'd either have to sign in with a whole different Adobe ID and a different account, or I'd have to delete all my images and start from scratch. And I love you guys, but I'm not going to do that. Anyway, so let's start from where you would start. I have a memory card. Now, you may be shooting on your phone. You may be importing images that are already in a folder. You may be importing images from different places. But I know a lot of people, as photographers, you're going to be shooting with whatever camera you have. And you're going to want to know how to get them off your memory card into Lightroom and then be able to use them in all those different places. Now, the process is pretty much the same, because it's add photos no matter where those photos are. So if they're on a memory card, great. If they're not on a memory card, they're on a folder, great. If they're on a mobile device, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I'm going to go ahead and push that memory card in. And this is one of the things that kind of like stunned me at first, because I'm a Classic user, and normally I'm used to Classic. The import dialog box comes up, and then you would start choosing what you want to import. When you insert a device into your computer that has stored or cards or photos on it, Lightroom doesn't do anything. It's just going to sit there forever. So what you have to do is you have to proactively come over to the upper left-hand corner here, and you have to proactively say, hey, I want to add photos, that little plus sign. And you also, again, this is for people that are new, so I'm not going to try not to spend a ton of time on terminology that's different from Classic, but that is one of the differences, is add photos versus import, because add photos just is more friendly. Now, when I click add photos, this is where it gives me the ability to go to that card. It sees the card connect in my computer. But if I didn't have a card, if I wanted to browse my hard drive and go get some images in a folder, I could do that as well. So it doesn't, this is what I meant by it doesn't matter where your images are, as long as you can get to them on your computer, you can bring them into Lightroom. So I'm going to say bring them in from this memory card, and it starts to show me all the thumbnails. There are hundreds and hundreds of images on this card. And I could just say, you know what, I don't want to guess, select all, and bring them all in. But that would bring in 830 photos, and I don't want to sit here for my limited time waiting for it to do any of that. So I'm going to uncheck the select all, and I'm going to be selective. I'm going to tell it. Yes, because a lot of these are exactly the same. They were just multiple frames of the same thing. So let's bring in a couple of those. Let's bring in that one. And again, I can be selective. Now, the one you might say, well, why are they grayed out? Because this is a very important feature, is that I shot on this card twice. And the ones that are grayed out, you notice if I hover over it, it says previously added. That means that those images were already added the last time I put this card in. So this is helping me not create duplicates. So I'll just grab a couple more here. These are all macro shots, as you can probably guess. And let's scroll down and grab a few more. Ooh, I like that one. All right, that's certainly enough for a demo. But as you can see, I can bring in one or bring in all 800 or anything in between. And so now I've chosen which ones. Now, before I just go ahead and click add 9 photos, and that odd number is bugging me, so let me go get a 10th photo. So before I bring in all 10 photos, there's one important part in the very top here in the middle that you should pay attention to. And that is add to album. And by default, because I didn't have an album selected, it says none. Had I been in an album already, it would then propose to import them into that album because it just assumes you were in that album. That's where you want them. All right. Sure, Sean, 830 files into the cloud. Yeah, no problem. I have tens of thousands in the cloud. It's not a big deal. All right, but back to the album. So if I don't choose an album, then that means it's just going to import the 10 and put them in the all photos. That's what we were looking at before. If I head back to the iPad, that's the all photos view. So if I that's all 59,640 images. If I were to scroll, I would see all 59,000 images. So that means they're just randomly in all photos based on the order I shot them in or imported them in. And there's no real organization in all photos. Now you see on the left-hand side, under the albums category, there's a folder called Adobe, a folder called current work, a folder called demo, a folder called events, so forth and so on. And if I were to tap on demo, then you would see that I have conferences, I have photography masterclass, and if I were to tap on photography masterclass, then you would see all the albums from the masterclasses we've done in the past that I've created, or collections if we were doing it in Classic. So what I would want to do is I'd probably want an album in there. I probably want an album that's going to have these how to get started with Lightroom images that would be organized, so I would just be able to get to these 10 without having to scroll through 59,000 images to always find them. So what I'm going to do is go back to my computer so you can see it. I'm going to go up here, and where it says none, again, I can choose demo, I can choose photography masterclass and put them in an existing one. So I actually have one called macro, I believe. Yeah, macro photography masterclass, but that's not what this is. This is a new masterclass on how to use Lightroom. So I'm going to go back over and click new, and then it's going to ask me to title that album. And I'm going to title that album how to use Lightroom, or LR. We'll just call it LR because that's what the icon says. So now we'll go how to use Lightroom. I'll create that. So now from that card into that album, they will still be in all photos because that's where all photos are. But now they will also be in an album. And no, they're not duplicated. They don't take up any extra space. You can have the same photo in as many albums as you want, just like you can have the same song in as many playlists as you want in your music program without it tying up or duplicating all that space. All right, so here we go. Add 10 photos. It's importing those 10 photos, meaning it's copying them from the card. It's not deleting them from the card. It's not doing anything to the images in the card. It's just copying them. It's copying them in their original format. So if they were JPEGs, it's copying JPEGs. If they were RAW files, it's copying RAW files. And Adobe, of course, works with, I would say, the vast majority of RAW formats out there for the vast majority of camera manufacturers. So you're pretty safe in that whatever camera you're using, if you shot in RAW, they would be accepted. If your camera shot TIFF, they would import the TIFFs. So now it's it organized them in a recently added area, which shows me that just now I imported 10 images. But more importantly, and by the way, and if I were to go back and click on all photos, and remember I said it was doing it by date, so they're further down because these were older. These images at the top are newer, so I scrolled away from it. So here I'm going to go back. If I were to click on that and go back to all photos, then it starts to show me down here where they are, because that's the date that they were shot. Okay, but anyway, if I were to go back to the recently added 1 minute ago, the 10 photos, I noticed down here in the bottom left-hand corner behind my shoulder here, let me get out of your way, that down here at the bottom, there's my how to use Lightroom album. And of course, it put the 10 in there as well. Now I'm going to hit the letter G to go to the grid view. There's two ways, there's two views of the grid view. There's this one and this one. I like this one because it's nice and visual, but I like this one because it gives me more information. And you see those little blue circles are basically indicating, here let me zoom in so you can see one. Those little circles are indicating that it's syncing those images to the cloud. So it's syncing the original format. It's backing them up. All right, so now, this album is just kind of loose out here all by itself. I don't want it to be loose out here all by itself. So I'm going to drag it into demo and into, not conferences. Let me scroll down. Scroll down. Very carefully scroll down. There we go. Into Photography Masterclass. So I can twirl up conferences. And then if we go to Photography Masterclass, now we're in that album. It's organized where it's supposed to be. It's also syncing that album across all my devices. So if I go to my iPad in a few minutes, it'll be there. Let's see if it's there already. Not yet. But it'll be there in a few minutes. All the images will be there as well because they're syncing up to the cloud. So the ones that don't have the blue circle, like this first one's already done, and it will eventually sync all the rest based on your internet speed. What if you're not connected to the internet? Then they'll just sit on your local hard drive until you are. So they'll just sit there locally on your storage until you do connect to the internet, and then it backs them up. And it caches them to the hard drive until they are backed up, and as long as you're still using them. And then once you're no longer actively using them, let's say months go by and you haven't touched them, then it will start to free up that space on your hard drive. So that's the other big difference from those of you who are wondering, well, why would I use this versus Classic? Is because I'm responsible for backing them up. I'm responsible for storing them. If I run out of hard drive space, that's on me. That's all. It's nothing I can do about that. But but buy more space. But in the cloud, these images are being backed up by Adobe, and therefore, if my computer crashed, hard drive died, I would still have access to my images. As soon as I got a new hard drive, as soon as I got a new computer, I would just simply be able to sign in again, and all my images would be there. So this is backing up the originals, not a smart preview, not something small, not a JPEG, not some other format. It's actually backing up the originals. All right, so Sean's asking, is there an eject after import setting in the preferences or another way to turn that off? No, there's no setting for it. It just does it or it doesn't do it. There's no actual setting for it one way or the other. All right, now let's go in and let's talk about what happens now. So like I said, those images are being backed up. And if I were to switch over to the iPad right now, there's that album. If I were to tap on it, there's all 10 raw files so far. Oh yeah, that's all of them. So it finished. Those are all 10. And I can start working on them anywhere I am. So if I'm on my phone, I can work on them. If I'm on my computer, obviously I can work on them. If I'm on my iPad, I can work on them. I can work on them anywhere. Hey, Andrew. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the desktop, and now let's talk about what else we can do here. So let's go around, before we spend a lot of time on these, let's go around the interface a little bit, and then we'll get into finishing up the workflow. So first and foremost, we've already learned there's all photos, which shows me all the photos I have in Lightroom. There's this recently added section, just, if I wanted to quickly get to photos that I added because I don't remember where they are, I can do that. And then there's also all of these different ways of seeing your photos. So you can see by date. This is not a big thing for me because rarely do I remember the date of when I shot something. So if you do, or if you like went on vacation or went on a special trip, that date you might remember, and you could easily find things that way. There's a nice people section. In the people section, Lightroom identifies faces, and then you can go in and name those faces for who those people are. So that's another a nice feature in that it does that automatically. It just auto detects faces, and then they'll all be unknown until you name them. And then once you name a face, if you add more photos of that person, it will automatically associate that person's face with that name. So you can also find by just name. I can go look at a name and see all the photos I've ever taken of that person. All right, connections, that's for usually output, like going to Blurb, Adobe Portfolio, or White House color printing. And delete it, because even though I delete a photo, so let's say I didn't like this photo because the leaf is damaged. If I delete it, it doesn't throw it away yet. It puts it in like your trash on your computer. It puts it in your deleted folder first. And then after, I think, 30 days, if you haven't recovered it, then it's gone from the cloud for good. And yes, if you delete it and you delete it from there, it is gone for good. It is not on any other device. Once you delete something on one device, it is deleted on all devices. Just like once you edit something on one device, it is edited on all devices. So that's just the way it works. All right, next up, let's go in and keep going down. So you see that under albums, I not only have the album called How to Use Lightroom, but I also have folders. Folders are just a way to organize albums. So rather than have a list of 100 albums, I have folders by category, like travel, for example. If I go to travel, well, those are all the places I've photographed as I've traveled. I don't want that long, gigantic list that hopefully will get longer this year. I want that long, gigantic list on the left-hand side, so I stick them all in a folder called travel. So you can either create a new album or you can create a new folder right here. So if I wanted a new folder called work, for example, I could create a new folder and then stick all my work albums in there, or vacations, and then I could stick all my vacation albums in there. All right, so that's how this got organized. That's how this got created. So I created a folder called demo. Then inside that folder, I created another folder called conferences, another folder called photography masterclass, and then all my demo collections that are just random are there as well. And I probably need to start organizing these because this list is getting quite long. So I probably need to break those up into folders as well. All right, but anyway, photography masterclass, and then we go into the how to use Lightroom. Now, once you're in an album, if I were to, for example, decide that this image should be first, you can rearrange the order. So now I've gone from date, added, or capture date to custom order. The minute I change the order from one of these built-in ones, it switches automatically to custom, because you can organize these in any way you want, any order you want, for whatever purpose you're organizing them for, just so you can visually see them in the order you want, so you can display them online in your portfolio in the order you want. You can see them on your devices in the order you want, and on your devices you can do slideshows and things like that, so maybe you want them in that order. And also just note that just because a set of photos is in one album doesn't mean, like I said earlier, that they can't be in another album. So for example, if I go create another album, create album, and I create the album called How to Use Lightroom Best Of. So it's now, because I'm in that Masterclass folder already, it says, do you want to create it there? Yes, I do. And I could even choose to include, if I had selected some photos first, I can even include the select those photos to do this all in one step. But let's say I didn't. I click create. That will create an empty album there. And I kind of say, well, I really like this one. I really like this one. I really like this one. And I really like this one. So I can take those four, drag them into that new album. And they didn't go away from the original album, but now they're in here too. So then the question people usually ask is, well, if I do something to the one photo in this one album, will it do it to the same photo in the other album? And the answer is, let's see. Let's say that I auto adjust the tone for this, And I really increase the blacks for this shot. Let's darken the blacks. Let's really make it dramatic. I see the ring light on these drops. That's kind of interesting. So I made that dramatic change. Now, if I were to go back and look at the other album, yes, that image has changed in the other album too, because the image, while it can be in multiple albums, really only exists in Lightroom once. So if you make a change to it, it's made a change to it everywhere it exists. It's not just you're making a change from this one album and you're making a different change in another album, and they're two different photos. So for that, you would literally have to duplicate the photo. Now, I know in Classic you have virtual copies and all that stuff, but we're talking Lightroom. Lightroom doesn't have virtual copies, so the photo is the photo. All right, next up. We got into a little bit of the editing already, but before we get into the editing, I'm kind of working my way across. We're going to get over to that side in a minute. But so we work, this is your organization on the left-hand side. You can organize any way you want, move things around. And for example, let's say I now go back to that, so best of is 4. I go back to the 10 and I say, well, I don't like this one in here. I just delete it. I heard a little beep. It didn't do anything. It deleted it. So now there are 9 photos in here, but it's still here, because deleting from an album doesn't delete the photo off Lightroom. It just deletes it from that album. If I really wanted to delete that photo because I thought it was bad, so let's go back to the other one. And let's say, well, because I'm going to do something to that one, so I don't want to do that one. Let's say, hey, I decide I don't need both of these. These are duplicates. I like this one better, so I want to keep this one and delete this one. Now, if I right-click on it and I say delete photo, that is really going to delete it. It's going to be gone everywhere. It's going to move it to the trash, or deleted items. But it's going to be gone eventually. Like it's as soon as the deleted album deletes everything that's in it after a time, it's gone. Versus removing it from the album. So if I say delete one photo, are you sure? Because this is going to delete this one photo from your Lightroom photo, all your albums, all your shares. Yes, I'm sure. It's gone. Now again, it threw it in here temporarily, but everything in here is going to eventually die. Everything in here is eventually going to go away. All right, let me grab some water. I sound kind of scratchy. Okay, next up. So that's organization on the left-hand side. Now, down here in the bottom left is really just different ways to view. So we talked about there's this view, which is the same grid. You're just hiding all the information, and the thumbnails are getting bigger. Then you have this view where all the thumbnails take up the same amount of space, whether they're vertical, landscape, whatever, they take up the same square. And also you get more information. You get what kind of file it is, you get rating information, so forth and so on. And then you have this view, which is called loop view, or I don't know if we call it loop view in here. That's what it is in Classic. I was going to hover over it and see if it told me. Now I'm really curious. Let's see. No, we call it detail view. So here it's called detail view, and Classic it's called loop view. All right, and then you have your different sorts, which we talked about. And then over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to skip over this for a second. On the right-hand side, you've got your ability to make your thumbnails bigger or smaller. So even in both views, you can make them bigger or smaller. So if you say, hey, I only have a few photos and rather than be zoomed in, I can make them zoomed in. All right, I'm in the way of the views. Sorry about that. Let me go back and show you that again. So first one's the grid. And again, you have the grid view, you have the detailed grid view, you have the detail view, and then you have the sorting. So that's what I just covered. And I had to go up to the menu because I wanted to see what this detail view was called, and it's called detail view. So photo grid, which is this one, square grid, which is that one, and then detail view, which is that one, and then full screen. So I can hit the letter F to go to full screen, hiding everything around Lightroom. And then F again takes me out of it, or you could go to view and do full screen that way. So each one of those is giving you the shortcuts as well. Okay, then, and I did the thumbnail size over here, that I'm now blocking that. So let's go back over to the other side. Thumbnail size was the slider. And then in the middle, the thing I skipped over is your rating system. So you can say, for example, if I go to the best of, I could say, hey, these are all great. Let me select all 3, and these are all 5 stars. Now, stars and flags have no definite, like you have to use them for this. They are just there as a way for you to identify photos that are different. So for example, maybe I think 5 stars are my best photos. Maybe I think 1 star should be deleted. Or maybe I think 2 stars are almost deletes. Maybe it could be fixed with editing. Maybe if I edit this little tear, I'll be happy with it. So it's really totally up to you. There's nobody going to say, hey, you used 5 stars when you should have used 3. It's really totally up to you. But the thing I would start asking you, though, the thing I would question is if you had a bunch of 1-star photos, why are you keeping them? Because I would guess 1 star means, yeah, they're probably not that great. All right, then you have, you have these flags, which you can use stars and flags. So I'll tell you what I tend to do. Now, Lightroom only has stars and flags. Classic has stars, flags, and colors. So if I were in Classic, I would tell you that I use colors, green, blue, whatever, just puts a blue frame around it, yellow frame around it, whatever. I use green as denoting it's one of my favorites. I use blue as denoting it's a client favorite. Since I don't have colors here, I have to use stars and flags. So I use the stars for me personally to say, I really like this photo, it's 5 stars. I really like this photo too, it's not as good as a 5 star, it's a 4 star. And then I pretty much don't use anything below that because what's 3, average? 2 and 1 probably should be deleted. So I just either it's marked with stars, meaning 4 or 5, or it's not marked, which means it's average. And if it's a 1 star, I've already deleted it. So I don't keep 1 stars. So that's my methodology. Now the pick flag or the reject flag, there's 2 flags. So that's the flag that's down here in the lower left-hand corner. That's these flags here. I use the pick flag for client picks, meaning that my client told me they really want this photo. They want me to edit it. They want me to do whatever, print it out. They want to pay for it, whatever it is. That's when I use a pick flag. The reject flag is so these, you can't be one or the other. It's either a reject or it's a pick or it's nothing. They can't be both because either it's a pick or it's not, or it's a reject or it's not. So a reject to me means that's one that I'm going to throw away. So that would be my equivalent of a 1 star. That means I've rejected this photo. It's not worth saving. It can't be saved. I've got a better one. Whatever my reason is, or it's a duplicate, whatever my reason is for rejecting it, I reject it. All right, so those are the ratings down here at the bottom. Then we move over to the right hand. And before we get there, there's something at the top middle, which is very important. It's your search. So let me go back to all photos. And let me go all the way back up to the top where I left off. This is the last photos I imported. I did a recording the other day where I was photographing my famous model Ken. Anyway, these are the last photos I took. Now, Lightroom does have keywording. It's this little tag down here in the bottom right-hand corner. It looks like a little tag. You can keyword photos. So I could actually keyword that photo and I could say that that's Ken or whatever his name is. And of course we have people tags as well. Or I could maybe tag these as bike, and because these are pictures of a bike. So I could tag these any way I want. But even if I never tag a single photo, as long as Lightroom could identify what the photo is, you can still search. So for example, over the years, I like photographing waterfalls. So I could go here and I could type in waterfall. And if I hit enter, it will bring up everything it thinks is a waterfall. Now, note that I said thinks because it's AI, it's machine learning. So what I'm hoping for is that it gets all my waterfalls. What I don't care about is if it gets some other stuff too, like if it brought up a house, it's not a waterfall, or brought up a mountain that didn't have a waterfall on it. I don't care that it brought up other things. I just care that I can find the waterfall I'm looking for. So that's to say that the search is not perfect. It will find images of what you usually search for, and it's doing a great job here for waterfalls. I never keyworded any of these, so it just found these because they're pictures of waterfalls. And that's a big advantage to Lightroom over Classic, because your images are in the cloud. The machine learning can tag them in the background for you because it knows what they are. It knows that's a waterfall, so it tags it as a waterfall. I could also say green grass, and these would probably come up. I could also probably say steps, and this one might come up because it looks like it's a waterfall over steps. I could also, like, this is not a waterfall. It's a wheel that could maybe contain water, but that's not a waterfall. So that brought up something that it's not. I don't care, as long as they brought up the ones I'm looking for. So just note that if you want to be very specific and keyword, you can, but if you don't ever keyword, you can probably still find what you're looking for. All right, so let's go back to the search for a second here. Now, when I click on the search, it also lets me find all my stars, all my flags. I can find all the ones that were picked flags, all the ones that aren't, or rejects, all the ones that are nothing, no flag at all, because those are maybe shots. I could also find different categories. So a lot of times, I'm not usually looking for the focal length. Like, I'm not usually looking for, what did I shoot at 28 millimeter? Like, I'm not looking for that kind of stuff. But I am a lot of time looking for images I shot with a specific camera. Like, I'm working on the iPhone conference, which is next week. By the way, check out the iPhone conference at kelby1live.com. So I needed shots that I shot with my iPhone over the years. Different iPhones. iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6, iPhone 7, iPhone 8, or I didn't have an iPhone 8, iPhone 10, so forth and so on. So I would go to camera, and it would pop up a list of everything, because it's in the metadata or exif data of the images. It would bring up the list of all the cameras that were in Lightroom that were ever used on any of these photos, and you could pick the camera you're looking for, and all those images would show up. So it's great for searching for that kind of stuff right off the bat. So if you're not looking for something with a specific name, but maybe you're looking for all the ones shot with a specific camera. You're looking for all the ones that were shot at a specific location, because if it's geotagged, it can find those too. You're looking for all of your JPEGs or your RAW files or your TIFFs. You're looking for all the images that are portrait or landscape. You're looking for all the images of a specific person, so you can find those quickly as well. So just note that you got some pretty good filtering there. And you have the quick filter, which is the little icon on the right-hand side. So this doesn't show you as many things, but it shows you, for example, if I go to camera, this is what I meant by it shows me every camera that was used to shoot anything that's in here. So every camera that's ever been used. All right, so next up, let's get out of the searching or filtering, and let's head over to the stuff on the right-hand side. So let's go back to our album. Let's go back to this one. And now, after you import your images, after you sort your images, the next part of the workflow, it would probably be to do something with the images to make them better. Because I don't want to say fix images, because we hopefully try to get it right in the camera. But Lightroom could be where you finish your images, where you do things that make yours look better. Like I made that image look more dramatic. It didn't need fixing. I just gave it some extra touches. So for example, I can go to this image. Then on the right-hand side, these are all my editing controls. So the very first one is edit. So first thing it does is it brings up the image in full screen view, or not full screen, but detail view. And then it shows me a bunch of controls on the right-hand side here for anything I might want to do to the image. So for example, one of the first things I tend to do is change the profile from whatever, especially if it was RAW. If it's JPEG, you don't have to worry about it. But if it's a RAW file, I usually choose a raw, if it's a RAW image, I usually choose a RAW profile that will give me a better starting point. So for example, camera standard looks kind of dull and flat. But if I hover over these, Like landscape, look at how much better a landscape looks. The green looks more vibrant versus standard looks kind of eh. Because the reason that this is on either standard or Adobe Color is because professional photographers have told us for years that they want raw to mean no adjustments. They want the image to look like it looked, came from the sensor. Now, you may have seen a JPEG preview on the back of your camera when you shot it that looked great, but this is what the image actually looks like without anything being done to it. Then you can start off with what you want. So landscape looks great, vivid looks great, standard does not look great, portrait's not a person, so it doesn't look great. So I would either pick vivid or landscape. I'm going to go with landscape. All right, so now that I've gotten that starting point, that may be all I ever do. It may not need anything else, but if it does, I can keep going. So what I tend to do after that is I tend to let Lightroom have a crack at it, meaning I know I can adjust exposure, I know I can adjust contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, but I'm going to be guessing. Unless I know right off the bat, like, oh, it's too bright, I need to make it darker. Or it's too dark, I need to make it brighter. Well, those kinds of things, if I know what I want right off the bat, but if the image looks pretty darn good right out of the camera with just the profile, then what I want to see is what Lightroom would do to it, even if I may not agree. So for example, I'm going to click Auto. So auto tone is what Lightroom decided to do to the image. And I could absolutely live with this. I could say, oh, yeah, I kind of like that. Or maybe I thought, I made it a little too dark. So I could then just, instead of me having to go mess with every slider, I can just say, no, 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 you dropped it by negative 0.43, almost a half stop. I'm going to put it back up a little bit. I want it to be a little brighter, especially if I was going to print it, because as we know, when you print a photo, a lot of times it prints a little darker than you saw on screen. So I might brighten it up a little bit so that if it does darken it during the printing process, it would go back to looking good again. If it finds a non-waterfall, can you remove that flag? And so Stephen's asking a good question. When I was doing the waterfall search and found the old mill, as Reverb Mike is telling me, can I say, hey, that's not a waterfall, so the algorithm gets better? No, I have no control over it. I can't fix it. I can't tell it that you found the right thing or you didn't find the right thing. Don't ever find this again. That'd be nice, but we don't do the training, meaning you and I. It's done by the Adobe teams. Okay, so now I fixed the exposure to what I wanted. Everything else looks pretty good. Could I go do other things? Sure. I can go into color. And we have this brand new color grading. So I could say, oh, you know what? Let's make it that kind of green. Or let's make it that kind of green. So I can go and tweak the color grading for the midtones or highlights or shadows to whatever I think. All right, and again, and I didn't say it the first time, so it's not again. Everything you're doing here is non-destructive. So if you didn't like that color grading later, you can go back, double click on that circle and reset. Oh, double click on that circle and reset it. So that gets it back to the way it was. Now I'm kind of liking what I did. Let's go back to that. Okay. So you can reset at any time. You close it, come back 2 days later, say, what was I thinking? I don't like the profile. I don't like the exposure. I don't like the auto. I don't like anything. You can reset the whole photo back to the beginning because none of this is permanent. All right, ever. It's never permanent. So no matter how many days, weeks, months, years go by, you can always go back and adjust it. So then we go down to effects. And maybe for the effects, like auto doesn't usually touch the effects at all. And the image looks pretty darn sharp. Let me go ahead and zoom in more. Yeah, the image looks great, sharp. I like it, but that doesn't mean it can't be sharper. So I like, for non-people images, I like to add texture. Now you can go crazy with the texture and overkill it and make it start introducing artifacts. That's the beauty of these sliders, is that they either go in one direction, so that's taking all the texture out of it, or another direction, and you just season to taste kind of thing. So maybe just a little bit more texture. That's zero texture. That's too much texture. So maybe something just a little bit over zero. Clarity, the difference between texture and clarity. I'm not going to get into all these differences because, again, I want to finish the workflow before I run out of time. But think of texture as just texture, and clarity is texture plus shadows and highlights. So it's adjusting the tones of the image as well as the clarity. Dehaze takes away the atmospheric haze. So I always add a little dehaze to outdoor shots, especially because there was some light, sun, something involved, and dehaze usually makes it better. Now down here in the lower right-hand corner, that stuff that we were looking at went away, and now we have a before and an after button. Look at where we started, where it looked great coming out of the camera until we saw what we could do with it. And you can just enhance it and make it better. Now, again, I did a whole class on everything in here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that now, but you can go into detail for sharpening. You can go into optics for lens profile correction, which it will take some of the vignetting out of this particular image. I'm going to go in geometry would be for fixing like buildings and cityscapes. But I'm going to go back to effects one more time, because even though the lens added some vignetting, I'm going to add a little bit more around the edges. Just kind of bring like a little spotlight right into that middle part of the photo. So I can have a lot of fun with this. And again, none of it's destructive. Now, from there, then you get into cropping or rotating the image. So if I felt the image needed to be cropped, which it doesn't, but if I did want to crop it in, I could crop it in that much. Again, if I don't like it, oh no, what was I thinking? I can go back and uncrop it. So none of that is permanent. You're never throwing away any of the image. The next area is the healing brush. And the healing brush is used to remove things. Like, for example, it's so small I can't even see it. There it is. I make my brush a little bigger. And if I didn't like this little speck of white right here, I can click on it or drag on it, and I can replace it with another part of the image just by dragging that around. So healing brush, you do have some healing capabilities here. Then you have 3 local adjustments. So think of the adjustment brush as painting any of these effects that we did globally into a specific area. So for example, if I want to drop the exposure of this area up here, now I'm painting lower exposure just in this corner. And I can say, no, not that low, or much lower, much darker. So it's a local adjustment. So you have a graduated filter, an adjustment brush, and a radial filter for making local adjustments. And again, if you decide, what was I thinking? That's got to go. I can just click on it and delete it, and away it goes. All right. Then you have menu options to get like into resetting your, reset your edits or reset to when you open the image. You also have versions, so I can create a new version of this, and I can say dramatic, for example. That's the dramatic version. Here's the original, and I can always toggle back and forth between a saved version. You can have as many versions as you want. So maybe I also want to make a version where if I go into color, let's go to color, and let's go in. No, I don't want to do it that way. I don't want to do, oh, you know what? It's probably up here. There it is. Black and white. I can make a black and white version of that, and I can create a version of that. So I can say create version, BW, black and white. So now I've got my dramatic version. I didn't lose my color. I've got my original. I didn't lose my original. I've got my dramatic version and my black and white version. If I don't like that particular black and white, I can go in and tweak it to my heart's content. Make it more contrasty, and go into the, even though the image is not in color, it knows it was color. So you can even affect the color of the image after the fact. And I can make that black and white number 2. All right, so that's it. So now I've got all these different versions that I can go back and forth between. The versions stay with the photo as long as it's in Lightroom, pretty much forever. And then, since we're again running short on time, let's talk about, now that you've finished that photo, what do you want to do with it? Well, that gets into the export or sharing capabilities. So if I go to the little share icon, the little box with the arrow up, is the universal share icon. If I go to share, then that gets me into the ability to share it with custom settings, meaning I want to choose the size and color space and all that. I just want to make a quick JPEG small for email. I want to make a JPEG large because I'm going to print it out and have it printed. I want to export the original with the settings, so it will go out as a raw file with the settings associated with it. Or I want to get a link and give it to someone on the web. Or I want to print it, have it printed at a professional service. So whichever one you're looking for, you've got them here. So if I go to custom, this is where I can go in and specify what I want. So for example, maybe I want a JPEG, but I don't want it full size. I want a custom size. I'm going to export it out to for Instagram. And Instagram is the width that they've always wanted is no more than 1080 on the longest edge. So 1080 high or 1080 wide. Great. I want 100% quality because I want it to look great. And if you set up a watermark, you can even include a visual watermark on your photos as well, which is thinking about it. There it is. And it's behind me. But there's the watermark that I set up as a graphic, a PNG file with transparency that you can go in here and you can create your own watermark, and your watermarks even sync to mobile. All right, but anyway you want to export that out, once you choose export, you can choose where you want to export it out. You don't get to name it, at least not in that export dialog box, but it will go out wherever you just told it to go out to. And of course, it's not doing anything to the original version. Sean's asking, how long does the version last? Forever. If you save a version, it's forever. It creates automatic versions, but those are not necessarily forever, but the ones you create, black and white, dramatic, those are forever. They stay with the photo forever. Okay, so I've taken you through the workflow: import or add, organize, edit, and export. That's really the gist of it. Now, it can go further. For example, in my last couple minutes here, let's say I really want someone to see all of these images that I'm working on. Well, you can go in and you can right-click on an album, and you can share and invite that album. So you can share that album, you get a shareable link. You can even invite people to be able to edit now, which is a new feature. So I can get a shareable link, there it is. That's a custom link for this particular album, and I can choose what people are able to do. So for example, do I want them to be able to download JPEGs? It won't let them download the raw files, but it will let them download JPEGs and export. Do I want them to be able to do see the metadata or see the location of where the image was shot? So you get to pick and choose what you want people to be able to do, and you get to also make it invite only. So if I make it invite only, then now I can get into the invite. I can actually add email addresses here, and I can choose whether or not they can contribute to the album. And I can choose whether or not they can edit and contribute to the album. So this last one's the new one. So if I invite people that I'm working with, and I want them to be able to not only see my photos, but edit the photos and add their own photos, I can make that available as well. So whichever method of sharing you choose, you have the ability to do it. So I'll do anyone can see, and that's it. All right, so then I would copy that URL to the clipboard and paste it out there for people to be able to see, and they would see it in their web browser. So they don't have to do anything extra to be able to see it. All right. My chat went away for some reason. All right, there we go. Oh, my chat seemed to have gone away. All right, I'm going to keep going. All right, so that's exporting, that is sharing an album, and that is allowing people to contribute to the album that you share. And I got 1 minute left. Was there anything else I wanted to cover? Editing, we did that. There was one more thing, but I can't remember what it was. All right, so that's pretty much how to use Lightroom. Whether you're using Lightroom on a mobile device, whether you're using Lightroom in the cloud, whether, for example, if I go back to my iPad now, that image that I edited is right here on the iPad. There it is. It's got everything I've done to it. I can get into all the settings and keep working on it. I can get into the versions and see those and work with those as well. So it doesn't matter where I make the changes, they're made globally across the ecosystem. All right, so with that said, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Stay tuned for the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. All right, cheers everybody.